Hey guys, my name is Ben from the Beniverse. Thank you guys for checking out this video. Today I got the opportunity to interview the director of Take Back the Night, Gia Elliott. I got to speak with her for half an hour, just break down the film, her career, what the genesis of this film was, getting to see it premiered, and all of that exciting stuff, her influences in horror, getting to talk a little bit about Craven, Carpenter, The Babadook, all of that. So that's just kind of a brief snippet, so I just wanted to introduce that all. She was absolutely lovely to have on the show. I was really thankful to getting to speak with her. I think she is a real talent and somebody that you will be hearing more of in the next few years. So anyway, Take Back the Night. It's available to stream on VOD. The links will be in this description below. Make sure to show Gia Elliott some love and support. With that all said, I just wanted to throw it over to my interview with Gia Elliott. Wonderful guest, absolutely delightful. And with that said, here we go. Hello, my name is Ben. Welcome to the Beniverse. And today I am joined by Gia Elliott, the director, writer, producer, worked on cinematography of the film Take Back the Night. Gia, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
One, I just want to just address that because I had to look at my notes to see everything you did on this movie. So my first question for you is, did you sleep?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. It took me 5 years. That's really the answer.
Oh, wow. So it takes you 5 years. So that's approximately what, 2016-ish is when you probably start this project?
Yeah.
And I saw in previous interviews that you did that you were a law school student and you were, I believe, in New York seeing some of the prosecution and how they treated the survivors of sexual assault. And that was kind of the catalyst for starting this movie and this project. As someone who's never been in a courtroom once in my life, could you just kind of just explain what you saw and what stood out to you in such a significant way in a courtroom?
Yeah. So I don't have any really good, juicy cinematic courtroom moments.
Mm-hmm.
What I do have is lots of I was working with a judge who was in the Supreme Court of New York, which is the bottommost court, weirdly there. It was a criminal court. So I would spend a lot of time going through motions and sorting through the papers that the lawyers were filing. So you'd meet the lawyers, you'd have them come in, they would drop their motions to the judge. She would sort of hear them out, and then we would review the papers. And there is a lot of discussion about, the word forcible or going back and forth on, well, the placement of the comma in this law really means X, Y, and Z for this case. And so there was a lot of scrutiny being placed on the survivors and whether or not they lived up to these poorly written laws, whether or not the facts of their case could be elegantly compared to these poorly written laws. And then also that their intake questions would support a telling of the facts that would reach the bar of these poorly written laws. So, the deck is really stacked against you if you are trying to pursue justice through the criminal court system.
And does that serve to kind of disillusion you on when you're going in? I'm sure going in as a law student, you probably had certain expectations. And then when you're in it and seeing the daily grind of it and some of those minute details that are used against people, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, I didn't. I dropped out after a year. I did. I left law school. I was I don't think this is for me, arguing over semicolons and the wording of laws. It felt insufficient.
Mm-hmm. And is that when you decide to move forward in acting, directing, in filmmaking, essentially?
Well, I dropped out of law school because it dawned on me that I kept calling out sick I was also working in the UN at the time. So I was calling in sick to my UN fellowship, and I was calling in sick to the court, and I was calling out sick to my class, and I was staying home and writing. I was writing a screenplay, and I was man, I think I am at the point now where I have to decide if my life is going to be what everyone else, my whole, like, you know, I grew up being like, I'm going to be a lawyer. And then every adult around me is like, oh, that's such a good goal. Like, that's so great. You know, like, am I either going to spend my life in this way that I know sounds really good at a party, that I know gets a lot of sort of appreciation and respect and holds a lot of social clout and is a sort of comfortable, safe path? Or am I going to do this like relatively scary thing of becoming an artist? And it became clear to me that I just didn't think I could do it. I didn't think I could continually show up and be a lawyer. I thought I just had to take a gamble and try to express the things that were going on in my head in a different arena.
And I can't imagine how scary that talk must be, going from I'm going to be a lawyer to I'm going to make art.
Yeah. So, you know, I'm lucky in the sense that my parents were punks. Like, they met in the punk scene in New York City in the late 70s. My mom managed my dad's band, played all over, like CBGB's Dirt Club. So I grew up really with a pretty artistic family. And so they ultimately were enthusiastically supportive of my hop. You know, my whole life, everyone had always known, they'd always known I was a writer. My mom just had this idea that I could be a lawyer and then make enough money that I could like write on the side, because they're musicians. They didn't really understand that there might be like vibrant, successful paths that you can monetize writing, you know, or monetize, you know, at that point I hadn't really been growing up, you know, we didn't really have a TV. I wasn't like exposed to a ton of, we were in Florida, like there wasn't like the movie business, you know, they didn't understand that there was potentially like an entire industry that I could work in. They just knew like the music industry and then all the normal people jobs, you know, like lawyer, doctor, that kind of stuff. So to them, they were supportive, but they didn't know to be supportive of that growing up, because they didn't really like have that in mind like we might now.
Now, so you drop out of law school, you're in New York, and you're kind of lucky in that sense that New York is kind of a cultural hub for film. And
yeah, and that would be the case if I had stayed in New York, but I dropped out and I immediately went to, my parents retired to the Smoky Mountains. So I went to the Smoky Mountains, where I stayed with my parents for like 6 months, and I just like hiked and wrote and hiked. Eventually I hopped out to the West Coast because I had a friend that I went to boarding school with who's a very talented writer, Elena Perpelet. She agreed to help me format a script, and we wound up co-writing the script, and it like sort of set me on fire, and I just became obsessed with the idea of movie making. And so then I quickly got a job at WME and did the agency trainee program for a year, which is exactly like everything it is in the book The Mailroom. It's exactly like what you're picturing from Entourage. It's that. I did that for a year to sort of cut my teeth and get a vocabulary. And then from there, I started, you know, making things.
Yeah. And what's the film scene just kind of briefly in the Rocky Mountains? Is there much going on there?
No, it was purely internal.
I'm sure, though, being out in nature for that time, that really does allow you to just kind of decompress and get with, I guess, your inner self and writing in there. Do you find that, because for me as a writer, I have to be in an isolated room when I'm writing. If there's even my phone's in the room, I lose all focus. Is that kind of similar for you, or what's your style of writing?
It's a great question. So, you know, I wrote this movie with Emma. We wrote it very collaboratively. I'm writing my second feature now, and I'm really heavy on the outline. You know, I want to make sure the outline's relatively bulletproof from a plot perspective, which I know is like not a popular opinion. People are like, character first, but I believe, and so does Socrates, but that's besides the point, that character is action. So to me, I don't care what somebody thinks about themselves while they lay in bed. I want to see what that person does, you know, when when thrust into a situation, I want to see that person find courage. So I want to know what those situations are that will illuminate character. So I'm really interested in plot and things happening. I'm interested in sequences. You know, kind of like, sorry, this is like a tangent.
No, go for it.
Relevant. But, you know, like in Hurt Locker, I think that's The Hurt Locker and The Wizard of Oz are my two favorite examples of somebody digging deep and finding bravery. In The Hurt Locker, it's the army man who can't pull the trigger and then causes his fellow soldier to explode because he didn't take out the like threat. And then he is struggling with his bravery the whole time. And then in the sniper sequence, which is like the greatest sequence ever created in cinema.
Yeah.
And he has that moment of redemption. You're like, ah! You know, to me, like that is, even if I haven't experienced that extreme moment in my life, when I see that, I feel that moment inside of my body. So I'm really interested in crafting like those types of sequences. So I really outline very heavily. And my husband's a writer. My husband's a fantastic writer. He's such a good writer that I married him. He was like, oh, you're such a good writer. Let's just spend the rest of our lives together and talk about story. And which is what we do. And so I will outline heavily, and then I will bounce ideas off of him like pretty incessantly until I feel really confident that they're good. And then I write and draft heavily. That's my process.
And with writing along with your co-star, Emma, what is not just the process of you two working together, but the ideas? Because I'm sure there has to be a little bit of back and forth going on, specifically because she's playing the main character in this film. She has a very strong interpretation of how this character needs to be written. How do you guys come together working on that?
Yeah, so, you know, for us, this was really like an issue forward film. We started from what we wanted to say and worked backwards of how to say it. So we started by picking up the camera and going to spaces and inhabiting spaces and discovering story in those places. You know, obviously Wong Kar-wai is a huge touchstone of that approach. And we were also really inspired by Dolores Huerta, who says that there's power in your body. And so we were just bringing our bodies places and showing up and experimenting with those types of things. And so we crafted, you know, scenes from that. We discovered story. And then from that, we started shaping. Angela Gulner, who plays the sister, she hopped on board. We had a third producer, Kwanzaa Gooden, who kind of entered the scene around that time too. And so we would go to places and we would really experiment and dive deep and look for moments. And then when we got some financing, we really sat down and was like, okay, how do we translate those moments into something bigger? And then from there, we really just layered layer upon layer upon layer from anything that we could pull from any real life fact pattern. We really wanted to incorporate, especially in the social fallout, like how she starts to alienate her friends and family and community around her. And so we tried to just like toss in as many winks and odes and nods that we could. So it was really it was like a heavily researched project.
And did you know from the beginning that Emma was going to be the star of the movie, or did that come kind of naturally with the script?
That was pretty much there from the genesis. We're like, we want to make a movie about this topic because I had been studying it. She had a lot of overlap in things that she was personally studying. And we were like, okay, so let's make a movie. And I knew that I would be the one to hold the camera because it was my camera. I was going to figure out how to use it, teach myself how to use it. And Emma had helmed feature films before. So it felt very natural, like we will flex our respective muscles to tell the story. So it felt very obvious that she was going to be star.
Yeah. And one of the things that I noticed when going into this movie, and it's a point that you kind of hit on earlier, where it's the character action first, like, and that's what drives the character. From the beginning of this film, that's what happens with Emma's character. She is put into it at the very beginning of this movie, and she always kind of feels like, poor comparison, but she's always kind of like a boxer in the ring, where she always feels like she's up against the ropes. You guys just jump into this movie. There's not this real setup to these characters. The setup is essentially the first 5 minutes in the party and then what happens with the monster. in the alleyway. I guess what my question with that is, there's a directness to this movie. How important was that for you guys to make this movie a direct movie? Horror often does it in a way where it's allegories. This one, it's an allegory, but it's very direct.
Man, I possess a certain amount of self-awareness that we are an indie movie, right? Mm-hmm. This isn't $100 million movie. You have to kind of get to the point.
Yeah.
Like, you got to just get us in there, throw us in the thick of it. And a movie is fascinating because you have no time at all to tell your story. 90 minutes is a snap. You know, if you're a screenwriter and you're struggling to make your page count, it should be a short film. Like, your first draft should be like 200 pages that you cram into 90 pages. You know, it's about trying to like break the time-space continuum and get as much as you can into 90 minutes. But when you're telling a story this big, you're like, you really got to pick the pop flash moments that you're showing, and you really have to get in there pretty quickly, because you don't have a lot. Like I said, you don't have a lot of time. 90 minutes is nothing, you know. Mm-hmm. So yeah, so that's kind of how we got to this like jump right in at place. And it wasn't always like that. We shot a lot more footage that is, you know, great footage. It's on that edit room floor, but like, yeah, at the end of the day, I'm like, character's action, like, let's just get her in there. Let's get her in trouble.
And this opening scene with the monster, it has such a unique design to it. How did you develop with the look of that monster? Was it based on any things that you had seen in horror before, folklore, whatever it may be, or was it just a complete just idea popped in your head, this is what I want it to look like?
At the time, Vanta Black hadn't been discovered yet, but if it had, that would have been my touchstone. I wanted it to be a black hole, like a black hole that sucks you in and takes you into this terrible place. Mm-hmm. And so we knew that we wanted it to be like the shadow monster, like a dark creature. And I wanted it to be cool. I didn't want it to be like an encyclopedic animal that felt like just an invented animal. I wanted it to be like some weird, cool creature, you know? And so we had a puppet builder, Chelsea Pickens, create the costume. Then the dancer choreographer, Karina Kinnear, brought to life the movement. And then we had designed these like white, decrepit, decaying arms to suck the Jane into the story, to like pull her into the darkness. So, you know, it's just these kind of like floating white arms against this shape-shifting background. And then when we brought the VFX artist Shannalise Barnett on board, she translated the allegory into the shape of the monster. She's like, well, look, if Jane is struggling to articulate what's happening to her, we should put the viewers in we should force them into the same perspective. And so we're going to change the shape of the monster from setup to setup. So like in this setup, it'll have a really long torso, but in this setup, its legs will be much longer. So it will escape the describable, so that as we watch, we're like, I'm not even sure what I'm seeing. And then the flies that are swarming around it do a couple of lovely things. Like they ground it in reality, because when the monster's coming, it's a sound. It's a sound that you can hear. It's a sound that you've heard before. And is it a rotting piece of fruit in your kitchen, or is it this monster coming back for you, right? And whether you're reading that monster as like PTSD, or whether you're reading that monster as victim blaming, or whether you're reading that monster as the actual thing that happened to you, still that sound can ground us in reality. And it also kind of represents all the people that swarm around Jane around this terrible event, like just how people get sucked into a survivor story. You know, the monster is similarly like a living organism covered in with a bunch of other living organisms swirling around it. So that's sort of like the genesis of the monster.
And when I was watching this film, and specifically scenes with the monster, I found it reminiscent of either Carpenter, Craven. I'm blanking on the director who did the Babadook a few years ago.
Jennifer Kent.
Yes, Jennifer Kent. What I found so impressive about it was that you guys clearly had a respect for the horror genre going into this movie. Was that a genre that before that you had a lot of knowledge / love for?
Yeah, I mean, I love horror movies. I love genre. I think it's very pure, very punk filmmaking. I'm also going to toss Joe Cornish into the hat because Attack the Block obviously is like the
Mm-hmm.
other amazing shadow creature. I love his monsters. I thought that those were so fun and so of that world, and how he made these kind of like poppy alien fun creatures, and how Jennifer Kent created this sort of like creepy, I mean, it's exactly like grief, right? Like it rises up and threatens to take over everything in its path. I wanted to create something that similarly played into the story, like those, like those monsters reflect the story of the world they're in. I wanted ours to reflect the story of the world that we're in. So yeah, kind of existing in those realms a little bit more. But the Carpenter and Craven references are like amazing. Someone put them in print.
When I was watching this film, I had a reminder to the experience of watching Get Out for the first time, Jordan Peele's Get Out, just with the messaging, with the mixed with the horror, mixed with the performances, all of it kind of coming together. And I think some of that is built on that it's such a defined location in Get Out with the house. And in this one, it very much feels like, I believe it's shot in LA. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And it's supposed to be LA. There's such a distinct look to LA. How do you go out and capture LA in such a seedy and dark, but also just in a way that feels honest?
Yeah. I mean, it's downtown LA predominantly. There's a lot of LA that you just never see on camera.
Mm.
And there are parts of LA that I'm familiar with that I inhabit. So, downtown, like the loft where Jane lives, that was my loft. And my husband and I had an art loft down there that we go to create things. And lots of artists work in that building. Like we took over the lease from Devondra Barnhart, It's just chock full of comic book artists, musical artists, filmmakers, just like, and it's seedy down there. It's wild. My favorite pieces of LA are like when you find yourself in a pocket and no one speaks English. It's this like vibrant, very international place where you can find yourself in little bubbles that feel like you're traveling. And so that was sort of the LA I was interested in capturing on film. And just me and a camera and Emma and a third producer, like we're just three chicks running around with a camera. Like literally nobody stops us.
Mm-hmm.
Like they don't think to, because I went down to the train platform, for example. Like I went down, we filmed a bunch. I was like, the next day I was like, I forgot something. I want to go back, get some, POVs of the train tunnel. Mm-hmm. My husband's like, I'll come with you so you don't have to go alone. I was like, okay. We go down there, cop in like 2 seconds. It's like, you can't film down here. I was like, it's you, go away. So I kicked him. I was like, I'm going to come back without you. So I go back down the next time with a friend who's a girl, and I march right up to a cop and I'm like, hey, we're down here with this camera. Can you like stand guard? He's like, sure. Because it's sort of the gift of the invisibility cloak of being a woman with a camera. Everyone just assumes that whatever you're doing is trivial.
When shooting this movie, I found it hard to not think about Emma Fitzpatrick's role in The Social Network, which takes place, I think that film comes out 2010, this one coming out 2022, or I guess 2021 is where it premiered. What I found so interesting about it is, at the time, that is such a look into social media at its kind of genesis. And this film focuses on social media now. How did you see, I guess, social media changing over time? How did social media kind of develop even 5 years working on this film?
What a good question. We were in the edit bay in December when Ronan Farrow's story broke about Harvey Weinstein.
Okay.
Which was like, a couple weeks on the heels of the Me Too hashtag trending on Twitter. Mm-hmm. And so I looked at Emma and I looked at the editor and I was like, listen, don't be mad, but I'm going to go out and shoot some more stuff because social media needs to escalate like this. We need to do way more of it. She was already an influencer and she already used it. So it was like, I was perfectly set up for it. It was such a gift that was baked into the story already, but we really did go back and, it took me 5 years to make this film. So like, as I was going back and adding, the car attack sequence is like one of the last things we shot. And that's obviously designed around social media, plays a key role of that scene. So the film had the gift of time and was able to incorporate the changing ways that we interact with social media in the film.
And you mentioned something really interesting in the fact that this movie's being developed pre the Harvey Weinstein and the other Hollywood actors and producers and all of them who then get exposed at the end of 2017 onwards. How does the Me Too movement, does it change anything of your interpretation of the movie, and does it take a new meaning to it, do you think?
I think the work that Me Too is doing is so important, and the kind of community that women see through that hashtag and through, Time's Up and It's On Us and all those kinds of organizations is so important. It's really hard for me to try to like reduce that down to dovetailing into my film in any way. If anything, I feel like I'm sort of joining this broader conversation, and it just shows me too that this has been on loads of people's minds, not just mine. And so I sort of hope that Take Back the Night is a low lift, easy sell way to get people who felt uncomfortable, maybe saying the wrong thing or stepping on toes, give them an easy allegory that they can kind of open up to the people around them using and invite them into the conversation.
This film must have been a really exciting one to premiere, especially I know it goes on to win a few horror festivals, just do really well. It's coming out this Friday, March 4th. How, as a filmmaker, 5 years of your life, it's done and you can't touch it. It's like, I've shot it. I just have to sit there with an audience seeing it for the first time and deal with that, and just, it's done. It's off my hands. What is that experience like? That has to be the most surreal, frightening, and exciting. All those emotions at once just coming through in a 2-hour like screening.
Yeah. It's, first of all, I'm proud of the fact my movie's 90 minutes. So I just want anyone listening to know it's not a 2-hour movie. I'm only asking for 90 minutes of your time.
I meant with trailers, but of course.
Oh, totally. It is. Yeah. I mean, all in all, 2 hours. I just want the people to know that it's a short flick. Man, I'm so sad. Like, I loved working on this movie. I loved being able to noodle. I loved getting a news story break and seeing a way that I could add a wink to it in my movie. I loved interacting with it. It's been such an alive thing, like right here, you see them. I don't know. My hard drives are like still sitting like right next to me. Yeah. Even though I've delivered the film, I'm feeling very teary-eyed and mournful about letting it go. It's been my source of expression in the way that I've been processing information and dialing it down into cinema. So the fact it's going to be frozen in time now and I can't continue adding to it is going to be pretty surreal. I think I'm going to have to immediately start another one.
Yeah, I'm sure. And I'm very excited to see where you go from here, because I think this is the start of a really promising career. I was really impressed with a lot of the direction in this film. It has a very stylistic take to it while also being completely grounded in reality. And I just wanted to kind of ask you, from that all, what was like the one biggest thing you learned making a film?
Pick a topic that you can really sink your teeth into. Like, if you're going to take on a feature, make it the biggest swing for the fences thing that you are interested in exploring. Because when it's hard, when you want to quit, when you're like, I can't even crawl, someone has to carry me forward on this project, that is what will save you. The fact that it feels like it's worthy of digging deep in yourself and pulling yourself up and back into your chair as a director. The meaning of the movie is what will save you. Gia,
I just wanted to congratulate you on the success of this movie, getting it to see it out in theaters this Friday, March 4th. Just wanted to let you plug just anything about the movie that you wanted to hit up.
No, I mean, just please, stream it on VOD. It's on Amazon, iTunes, anywhere you can find video on demand. We should be there. And find me on Instagram, Take Back the Night Movie. I if you want to talk, don't be shy, slide into my DMs. I will answer every single message I receive.
And thank you so much, Gia, for joining me today on this episode. Take Back the Night comes out this Friday, available for on VOD, I believe in select theaters in big cities. Check it out. It's a really good one. I know everyone's going to be watching the Batman this week. Check out 2 movies this week. I did it. I saw both movies yesterday. It was a real big blast. So thank you, Gia, for joining me today, and just all the praises and just good luck on this opening weekend. And I can't imagine how excited you are.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's been a joy to talk to you.
And from the Beniverse, I'm Ben. Take care, guys.